In this video presentation, we're going to be taking a look at Microsoft Lync Server 2013 features. Lync Server 2013 is a unified communications platform that allows us to communicate using various modalities of communication. In this lesson, we're going to introduce the various functions of Microsoft Lync Server and the individual features supported by each of them. We're going to be taking a look at instant messaging and presence, persistent chat, conferencing, and enterprise voice or voice over IP. We're also going to introduce the various editions of Microsoft Lync Server, Standard and Enterprise Edition. We're going to look at the Microsoft Lync Server roles, and we'll wrap it up with an overview of some examples of topologies. The first function of Microsoft Lync Server 2013 that we're going to be looking at is instant messaging and presence. I understand that most people probably don't need much of an introduction to what instant messaging and presence is, but what we're going to do is take a look at the various features provided by Microsoft Lync. Let's take a look. Instant messaging has become extremely popular, both in personal use and in business environments. Instant messaging provides an extremely efficient and effective form of communication. When we install Microsoft Lync Server at Carve Rock Fitness, whether we install the Standard Edition or the Enterprise Edition, instant messaging and presence are both enabled by default with Lync. So as a result, if we enable clients, they will be able to use IM and P instant messaging and presence. The ability to use instant messaging and presence can be disabled. So when we first deploy Microsoft Lync Server, we have the ability to use instant messaging and presence internally. Microsoft Lync also supports public instant messaging connectivity provisioning, or what we call PIC interoperability. If you want to set up instant messaging beyond the borders of your company, we have to go through something called a PIC provisioning process. And there's a guide that you can download from Microsoft which explains the process that you have to go through. But what this allows me to do is to set up connectivity with external providers such as AOL, Yahoo, and MSN. For AOL and Yahoo, this allows me instant messaging and presence integration. For MSN, it also allows me audio and video peer-to-peer connectivity as well. Microsoft Lync Server also supports integration with XMPP-based providers, the Extensible Messaging and Presence Protocol support with providers such as Google Talk. One of the nice features that we have with Lync Server 2013 is that the XMPP support is now built into our edge servers and our front-end servers. So you don't have to get a hold of an XMPP gateway like we had to do with Lync Server 2010. One of the things that I really like about instant messaging is not only can you send somebody a quick message and get a hold of them quickly, but it also allows me to see somebody's availability and their willingness to communicate. Your Microsoft Lync client has predefined presence states, but we can also create custom presence states also. Your contact's availability will be identified by various color codes, like for example green when you're available, or red when we're busy or in a meeting. We also have yellow that indicates that we'll be right back, or that we're inactive or away from our PC and the machine has become idle. With Microsoft Exchange integration, our availability can also be reflected based upon our schedule on the Microsoft Exchange server side. So your Microsoft Lync client presence can automatically update based upon your schedule in Microsoft Exchange. So as an example of this, if I have a meeting currently scheduled inside of Outlook, my status can update to reflect that I'm in a meeting. Or if I'm currently engaged in an audio or video call, my status can indicate that I'm busy or that I'm in a call. But as you would expect, you can also toggle your presence state as well, so you can control this if you choose to. Let's take a look at another function provided by our Microsoft Lync Server with persistent chat. When you're defining your topology with the topology builder, we can define this brand new server role called the persistent chat server. The persistent chat server role is a brand new role with Lync 2013. We didn't have this role back with Lync Server 2010. In Lync Server 2010, we had the group chat server, which was treated as a third-party trusted application by Lync. Well, it's now a full-blown server role. Once we've deployed the persistent chat server at Carve Rock Fitness, we're going to be able to create, administer, and participate in multi-party conversations. The chat rooms are going to provide another forum for your clients to be able to communicate on the network. So it's going to be able to improve communication and also provide feedback on certain topics that we define. One of the big benefits that we have with persistent chat is that conversations persist over an extended period of time, so the end users can participate in the conversation when it's convenient for them. If somebody posted an entry inside of the chat room earlier today, when I connect into the chat room later on this evening, I'll be able to see that entry and I can respond to it at my convenience. If you're wondering how to participate in persistent chat, that functionality is now provided right inside of the lync Server 2013 client. So now not only can we use the lync client for instant messaging and presence, audio and video, collaboration, app sharing, and desktop sharing, we now have the persistent chat functionality built into the client also. Not only is the persistent chat integrated into your lync client-side software, it's also integrated in my administrative consoles. With the prior version of Group Chat, we had a Group Chat admin tool. Well, we now use the control panel or the lync server management shell. And when it came to integrating configuration settings into your chat server, we used to use the Group Chat configuration tool, but now we have our topology builder. At Carvrog Fitness, when we first started to evaluate Microsoft lync Server 2013, one of the factors that helped guide our choice into setting up Microsoft Lync on-premise is that persistent chat server is not available in Microsoft Office 365. It's available only to on-premise Lync 2013 customers. Now that we've had an overview of instant messaging and persistent chat, let's take a look at conferencing. Microsoft Lync Server supports peer-to-peer audio and peer-to-peer video. When we get to 3 or more parties participating in an audio or video session, that falls into the category called conferencing. With lync Server 2013, we can deploy audio and video conferencing. We also have the ability to deploy application and desktop sharing. So while participating in a web conference, we could share out our applications or our desktop if we chose to. When you schedule an online meeting, a web conference, we can also use whiteboards. We have support for peer-to-peer file transfers, as well as uploading files into a meeting. We typically call that a handout. We also have the ability to poll the individuals participating in an online meeting. You have the ability to schedule meetings inside of Microsoft Office Outlook or possibly coming in through Outlook web app. When you schedule your meeting, the meeting request will typically get sent out with a meetings join URL that your clients click on to join into the meeting. Microsoft Lync Server 2013 now has a web-based client that includes audio and video integration built right into it. With Microsoft Lync Server 2010, we used to have a web-based client, but it didn't have the audio or video built into it. So we had a downloadable client called the Lync 2010 Attendee, which did have the audio and video. Well, since Microsoft has included the audio and video in the web-based client, we don't have a new version of the Lync Attendee. It's been decommissioned with Lync Server 2013. Another new feature that we have is embedded media inside of PowerPoint. We can now play a video file with audio embedded inside of a PowerPoint presentation inside of my Lync meeting. When we look at the video presentation for a meeting, we now have support for high-definition video, resolution up to 1270 by 720. And for environments that don't have the bandwidth, we can use lower-level resolution through VGA, 640 by 480. Another new feature that I'm kind of fond of is being able to spotlight a video stream during a presentation. So if you're the presenter or an organizer, you now have the ability to select a video stream from a participant inside of the meetings list, and you can designate that video stream as the focus for everybody inside of the meeting. Another feature provided by Microsoft Lync Server is Voice over IP. Clients that have been UC enabled within your Lync environment have the ability to make peer-to-peer audio calls using real-time audio. So even if your company is using another Voice over IP solution, Lync can still be used for peer-to-peer calling between the clients within your organization. If you want to use Microsoft Lync Server as your full Voice over IP solution, then you would deploy a feature called Enterprise Voice. In order to use Enterprise Voice, your Exchange server functions as your backend for your voicemail storage. It also functions as your auto attendant for incoming calls. The Microsoft Lync server environment can also coexist with PBX environments. It can interoperate with IP-based PBXs directly. It can also interoperate with a legacy PBX going through an IP-based gateway. If a call comes into your Microsoft Lync environment for a client that's been unified messaging enabled, if the client doesn't answer the call can be routed over to the Microsoft Exchange Unified Messaging Server. The Unified Messaging Server can play an audio prompt, record a voicemail, and submit it for delivery over to your mailbox so you as a client can receive your voicemail. The Unified Messaging Server can also notify the client of missed calls and new voicemails. When you have clients within your Lync environment that have been enterprise voice enabled, they can place calls to other users by name or number. They also have support for all of your basic call handling. You can put calls on hold, you can transfer calls, you can even park calls if call park has been enabled. When a call comes into our number, we can also have the call ring on multiple phones simultaneously. Another nice feature typically used by executives is called delegation. A delegate can answer calls on another person's behalf, they can make calls on somebody's behalf, and they can also possibly schedule meetings for another individual. The Lync server environment also handles automated call distribution through the Response Group application. It's a departmental automated call distribution built right into Microsoft Lync. It's an extension of Enterprise Voice. With real-time audio calls going across our WAN links, bandwidth is always a concern to us. Microsoft Lync Server has a built-in bandwidth management feature called Call Admission Control. Call Admission Control allows us to define bandwidth limitations on WAN links that can be used for real-time audio or real-time video, either on a per-session basis or on a total aggregate basis. So if a user tries to place a call across the WAN link and there's not enough bandwidth to support that call because we've maxed out our limit, we can have that call get rerouted out through our PSTN lines or possibly out through our edge servers. For some of the remote offices at Covrock Fitness, we're thinking about using survivable branch appliances. A survivable branch appliance provides enterprise voice resiliency in the case that your WAN link over to your centralized telephony environment goes down. A survivable branch appliance is a device that you purchase from a qualified vendor, and you would set it up with local connectivity through either a PSTN connection or a SIP trunk. So if your connection over to the central telephony environment does happen to go down, like in our case the connection over to Phoenix or Scottsdale, the clients can still make and receive phone calls through their local SBA. Now that we've had an overview of the functionality provided by Microsoft Lync Server, let's take a look at the different versions of Microsoft Lync and the different roles that we deploy within our Lync environment. When discussing Microsoft Lync Server 2013 editions, you're going to hear Standard and Enterprise Edition terminology being thrown around. Both of the editions of Microsoft Lync Server will support all of the forms of communication, including Enterprise Voice. The Enterprise Edition of the product is typically a better choice for organizations that require high availability or organizations that have more users. When you're defining your topology for Microsoft Lync deployments inside of your topology builder, once you've defined your sites, you then define the pools underneath your sites. And when you define a pool, you can either have the Standard or an Enterprise Edition pool. The Standard Edition will support all of the forms of communication, but it only allows you to set up a single server within that pool. So the Standard Edition of Microsoft Lync is a single server, so if that one server goes down, the clients that are hosted on that server encounter some form of an outage. Now, we're not going to go into all the details on high availability and all the different choices you have at this point. The key point you want to pick up here is that with the Standard Edition of Microsoft Lync Server, you have a single server working all by itself. And that Standard Edition server also has local copy of SQL Server on it, which is hosting the databases for Microsoft Lync. Because it's only a single server, it doesn't provide high availability, and it's not very scalable, up to 5,000 users maximum. Now, the Enterprise Edition of Microsoft Lync Server, on the other hand, allows you to set up multiple servers in a pool. It's kind of like an array of servers that work together supporting common users. These servers have the ability to run applications across the pool, so if one of your servers goes down, the other servers in the pool can still service your clients and run the applications for the pool. If you set up an Enterprise Edition pool, it does require a back-end SQL server to host your lync database content. An Enterprise Edition pool is scalable up to 80,000 clients. So not only does this provide high availability, it also provides much more scalability. While you're designing your Microsoft Lync Server 2013 environment, a great place to start off is using the Lync Server 2013 planning tool. You provide information into the planning tool, and the planning tool will provide you with some guidelines on how to set up your environment, including information like the number of servers required in your pools, and it also provides you with information regarding DNS certificates in your firewalls. Based upon the information that you provide into the planning tool, it will give you information regarding what you'll require for roles on your network and how many servers running the different roles. Let's take a look at what some of the server roles are. The first couple of roles we have should be just a review. The Standard Edition server is a server that we set up in a pool. It's used for small organizations or pilot deployments. All of your Lync 2013 server roles and your databases are all on a single server, and it doesn't provide high availability, and it has a limit of up to 5,000 users. With your Enterprise Edition front-end servers, we have the ability to support larger organizations that scale beyond 5,000 users per pool. When you're setting up servers in a front-end pool, it requires that you have a back-end server role, which is your Microsoft SQL server, which hosts your SQL databases. Whether you have the Standard Edition or the Enterprise Edition pools deployed in your environment, they both handle user authentication and registration. Your front-end pool will also provide the presence information and contact card exchange for your clients. The front-end pool runs your web components, which supports a lot of your web-based applications, such as your web scheduler or the join launcher, which is used when you go to join into a meeting. If you have enabled archiving and monitoring, that's now co-located on your front-end pool, so we don't use dedicated servers for that anymore like we did with Lync 2010. Your applications are also hosted on your front-end pools, such as your conferencing and the automated call distribution provided through the response group application. If you've deployed web conferencing, PSTN dial-in conferencing, and audio-video conferencing, that's also hosted on your front-end pool as well. Let's take a look at the Edge server. Another very important role in our Lync infrastructure is called the Edge server. The Edge server is a server that exists out in your DMZ, and it's typically installed on a standalone or workgroup-based machine. The Edge server provides connectivity between your internal Lync environment and the Internet. The Edge server provides connectivity for federated partners. It also provides connectivity for public instant messaging, for integration with instant messaging providers such as AOL or Yahoo or MSN. The Edge server also allows clients that have been invited to a conference to connect in from the Internet. So when you invite somebody from outside of your organization to participate in a conference, they're typically connecting in through a reverse proxy server and our Edge server. The Edge server also plays a role in the mobility services, which provide Lync services down to your mobile clients through the Edge. And our next server role is called the mediation server. The mediation server role is required if you set up enterprise voice or dial-in conferencing. The mediation server typically translates signaling and codecs coming in from our gateways. So the mediation server is the server role that handles the communication with an IP-based PBX, a PSTN gateway, or a session border controller with your SIP trunk connections. When you run the mediation server role, it can either be co-located on your front-end servers. It can also run in a dedicated pool for more scalability. Lync Server 2013 also has a role which is called the Director server. The Director role is an optional role that has become de-emphasized with Lync Server 2013. If you're using a Director, for clients inside of your organization, it can provide authentication and registration, and more specifically referrals over to the primary and backup registrar pools for your clients. So when a client goes to register and authenticate, and they contact a registrar running on the Director server, the Director server provides that client with information on where the client is homed and where the client's backup registrar pool is located. The Director role also provides a next hop for traffic coming in across the DMZ. More specifically for SIP traffic coming across your Edge server and web traffic coming across your reverse proxy. The Director server can pre-authenticate client requests coming in from the Internet before the traffic makes it over to the front-end pool, so it provides another layer of security against denial of service attacks. Microsoft Lync 2013 also has the persistent chat server roles. The persistent chat server roles allow us to maintain chat conversations over extended periods of time. It allows us to host chat rooms. With the persistent chat service, we have the front-end server which runs the persistent chat service. You've got the back-end server which stores your chat history data. And if you deploy it, we also have the optional persistent chat compliance back-end server which is used for compliance purposes. If you're deploying the standard edition of Microsoft Lync Server, the persistent chat can be located on the standard edition. The enterprise edition, it's not supported. You've got to use a separate server for your persistent chat server. So the persistent chat front-end server cannot be co-located with the enterprise edition front-end server. One more quick note before we leave this topic. If you deploy the Microsoft Lync Server 2013 archiving or monitoring roles, well, these roles are now co-located on your front-end servers, so they're not really dedicated roles anymore. The archiving allows me to capture instant messaging and conferencing data, and the monitoring servers allow me to capture call detail records and quality of experience metrics information in regards to the quality of communication on the network for the various forms of communication. So instead of setting up dedicated servers for these roles now, it's now handled by your front-end servers participating in your pool. Before we wrap up this video, let's take a look at a couple of different topologies, one with the Standard Edition and another with the Enterprise Edition of Lync Server 2013. In our first example of a topology, we have a reference topology without high availability. You'll find this diagram out at TechNet, and it's typically labeled reference topology with limited high availability. I've relabeled it without high availability because it's the standard edition of Microsoft Lync Server. You'll notice that I have a central site, and towards the center of the diagram here, I have a single standard edition server running all of my Lync functionality on that one box. So if that server were to go down, my Microsoft Lync functionality would not be provided by any other servers. You'll also notice that across the WAN link, out at my corporate branch office, I've got a survivable branch appliance. So for enterprise voice, if this WAN link were to go down, the clients out at that branch site would still be able to make and receive phone calls through their local PSTN connection. On the left portion of the diagram, I also have my DMZ, and it looks like we're using an edge server and a reverse proxy, so that we have connectivity out onto the internet for things such as public instant messaging connectivity. We have connectivity for federation relationships, for mobility support, and we could also allow clients to connect in for our conferences. In the second diagram, we have another reference topology, and this one is providing high availability. Once again, this is a diagram that you'll find readily available out at TechNet. You'll notice in the diagram that now instead of having a single server, I now have a pool of front-end servers, and it appears as though we're using DNS-based load balancing for our SIP traffic and our media streaming traffic. If you're using DNS-based load balancing, you still have to use hardware-based load balancing for your web traffic. You can also see on the back end I have a couple of SQL servers. With Lync Server 2013 to provide higher levels of availability, we can now use SQL mirroring. In this diagram, we also have some dedicated pools, the audio-video conferencing pool and the co-located monitoring server and archiving servers. Well, for the sake of the diagram, they've expanded these out, but these now run co-located on your front-end servers. Here you can see that I have my mediation server pool, and the mediation server pool can either be co-located on the front-end servers or they can be dedicated. In this case, it looks like we're using dedicated mediation servers for handling the connectivity over to our SIP trunk. The mediation server handles intercommunication with PSTN gateways, IP-based PBXs, and in the case of your SIP trunk, with your session border controller. Another important point to note in the diagram is that when you're setting up the Enterprise Edition of Microsoft Lync Server, it does require a file share that your front-end pool is going to use to maintain application content that is accessible to all of the servers participating in that front-end pool. We typically want to make that file share highly available to those front-end servers. Well, that's the end of the presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll see you in the next video.